Hi, I'm Corey Driver, and this is Moving Forward, Flu Edition! So this week we are in Jeremiah 31, Psalm 147, Ephesians 1, and John 1, and we're talking about grace. I might be sick now, but I have had a really good last month. I went to the annual meeting of the American Academy of Religion and the Society for Biblical Literature, and I had a blast. Fortress Press sold out of copies of my most recent book, God, Gender, and Family Trauma. I delivered 2 papers to gracious receptions. I attended a beautiful, welcoming church service at Park Street Church. And my wife came along, and our folks took care of our kids, and we had a lovely weekend together. It was like awesome thing piled up on top of awesome thing. It was grace upon grace, and that's what we're talking about this week. In the passage selected from Jeremiah, God through the prophet talks about a time when the people will be brought back home. Jews will be brought back from the north and every place else they have been scattered to live in Zion. That's Jeremiah 31:8. Jeremiah said there will be those who tried to keep them from immigrating from the lands in which they have dwelled, and there will be those who want them to not settle in the land. But the Lord will gather the people as a shepherd gathers sheep. And in my favorite image for God in the entire Bible, used here and elsewhere, God will scoop up God's children as a father scoops up and picks up children. The context for these passages are the national emergency, calamity at the hands of the Babylonians. Jeremiah and other prophets frame this as punishment by God for the Judahites' idolatry and injustice. And yet, God promises to literally move heavens and earth to bring the people back to their homeland after their punishment. This is a profound grace. The psalmist sings of still other graces. God promises to make the people of Jerusalem secure by granting peace, reinforcing protective structures, and by bringing water in due time. As if that weren't enough, God will treat the descendants of Jacob differently from other peoples. God declares divine words to Jacob and God's statutes and judgments to Israel. This unique gift of God's words and commandments is grace indeed, and a cause for praise and celebration to the psalmist. It is this context of grace upon grace heaped up by God that we need to understand John's prologue in. First, we need to overcome the major disservice from the maybe familiar King James Bible. Those who were attempting to translate made several major errors and offer several disservices, including inserting a disjunctive but where none exists in the Greek in verse 17. Grace and truth are not in opposition to God's law given through Moses. Certainly the writer of John didn't think so anyway, but are framed by the previous verse 16, as grace heaped upon grace. Law is grace, truth is grace, grace upon grace. The core argument of John's prologue is that the Word should be recognized as a continuity of grace. The Word co-created the universe and came to God's people, again, and John's referencing Deuteronomy 32:9. While some rejected the Word, the gospel account tells of hundreds and thousands who recognized and accepted the Word as the Word presented himself. In so doing, they become heirs of God. God's gracious approach and reapproach to the people will come as no surprise to anyone who's read Jeremiah, Exodus, or most of the preceding books of the Bible. This is God's grace stacked upon previous revelations of God's grace. And like any good infomercial salesman, Paul adds, but that's not all. To the Ephesians, Paul says Jesus' gift of grace upon grace is extended to people previously hostile towards God. In Jesus, the former Artemis-worshiping citizens of the second city of the Roman Empire were redeemed by the Messiah's blood, forgiven of their sins, and made inheritors of the riches of God's grace. This inheritance is available and for all who participate in the way of Jesus and accept redemption into God's own possession. Again, referencing Deuteronomy 32:9. The good news here is that God's grace piles up on top of itself, not undermining or undoing previous graces, but heaping grace upon grace. It was God's good pleasure to redeem God's people and return them to their home in peace and safety. It was God's good pleasure to come again and again to God's people, bringing good tidings of grace. And it is God's good pleasure to announce a surprise inheritance to still other peoples, if we, are willing to accept the lordship of Jesus over the lordship of Caesar. God keeps on being gracious to people who have turned away and previously been hostile to God, wooing us back with the gifts of law, grace, and truth. Thanks be to God. Amen.